You see stories like this on the news, hear whispers among neighbors, but you never truly believe it could happen in your own family. Until it does. Until you're sitting there at your own kitchen table, listening to the people you raised, the people you loved more than life itself, openly discuss how best to take everything you have. It wasn't a heated argument or a desperate plea. It was a cold, calculated conversation about assets, property values, and handling their mother's future. A future they apparently felt entitled to control and profit from immediately. Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below, and if you believe families should protect, not exploit each other. Hit that like button and subscribe for more. My world had always revolved around my family. After losing my husband, Robert, 3 years prior, my 2 children, John and Emily, and their spouses, Sarah and Mark, became my anchors. Robert had been a good provider, and we'd lived comfortably, saving diligently. Our home, a modest but paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood, represented decades of hard work. There were also some investments, enough to ensure my security well into my later years. I had always been generous, helping John and Sarah with a down payment on their first home, assisting Emily and Mark with childcare costs, and always being there with a listening ear, a home-cooked meal, or a financial boost when they faced unexpected expenses. I genuinely believed in the strength of family bonds and the principle of looking out for one another. I saw their struggles as my struggles, their successes as my successes. What I didn't see, not at first, was that they had begun to see my resources solely as their potential resources, waiting to be claimed. John and Sarah were the first to show the cracks. Sarah, in particular, had an air of quiet entitlement that had grown more pronounced over the years. Their financial struggles always seemed urgent, always requiring just a little more than I was initially comfortable giving, but I always relented. John, easily led, would echo her concerns, painting pictures of hardship that tugged at my heartstrings. Emily and Mark were less overtly demanding, but seemed to follow John and Sarah's lead, nodding along with their complaints about the cost of living and the unfairness of their situations. I recall one Sunday dinner, just months after Robert passed, where Sarah, looking pointedly at the antique sideboard Robert had inherited from his grandmother, remarked casually, "It's such a shame valuable pieces like this just sit around. They really belong with the next generation. Don't you think, Mom?" I brushed it off then, attributing it to youthful impatience, but the memory lingered, a tiny, uncomfortable prickle under my skin. The requests became more frequent, the sums larger. It wasn't just emergency car repairs anymore. It was help with mortgage payments, contributions to lavish vacations, funding for speculative business ventures that never seemed to pan out. My savings, while substantial, weren't infinite. I started to feel a gentle pressure, a shift in the dynamic where my no was met with thinly veiled disappointment or passive-aggressive comments about my perceived lack of understanding of their challenges. "It must be nice not having to worry about bills, Mom," Sarah once sighed during a call asking for money for new furniture. I reminded her gently that their father and I had worried about bills for decades to build what we had, but the point seemed lost on her. It was a Tuesday afternoon. They thought I was out. I had a doctor's appointment scheduled, but it was canceled last minute, and I'd come home earlier than expected. As I quietly unlocked the front door, I heard voices from the living room. John, Sarah, Emily, and Mark. They were gathered there, unusually casual for a weekday afternoon visit, and the tone of their conversation was immediately unsettling. Sarah's voice was sharp, clear. "Look, she's not getting any younger. We need a plan. The house is the big one, obviously. We could sell it, split the equity 4 ways after the costs." My hand froze on the doorknob. My heart hammered against my ribs. I listened, unseen, as my children and their spouses dissected my life, my assets, my future, as if I were already gone, or perhaps as if I were an obstacle to be managed. "What about her investments?" Emily asked, her voice softer but just as calculating. "Harder to get at," John replied. unless we can convince her to invest in one of our ventures. Sarah's new online shop, maybe? A guaranteed return, Mom. We just need seed money, he laughed, a cold, unfamiliar sound. Or, Sarah interjected, we push for power of attorney. Say she's getting forgetful. The doctor will back us up, right? We can manage everything then. Get her into a smaller place, maybe assisted living eventually. Release the equity. Assisted living? Mark sounded surprised. But she's perfectly healthy. Details, Mark, details, Sarah scoffed. We paint a picture. We're concerned children looking out for our mother. It's airtight. Unless she suddenly gets suspicious. She won't, John said confidently. She trusts us completely. She always has. She practically lives to help us. She's easy. I stood there in the entryway, rooted to the spot. My mind struggled to process what I was hearing. She's easy, my love, my trust, my willingness to sacrifice, reduced to a weakness, something to be exploited. The pain was physical, a sharp, twisting knot in my stomach. It wasn't just about the money, it was the utter contempt, the cold calculation, the fundamental betrayal of everything I believed family should be. This wasn't concern, it was avarice, thinly masked. They weren't planning with me, they were planning against me. They were circling, vultures waiting for the right moment. Initial disbelief washed over me. No, I must have misunderstood. Maybe they were joking, planning a surprise? But the details, the mention of power of attorney, selling the house, assisted living, there was no warmth, no love, only transactional terms. The rationalization attempt lasted only a moment before the stark, ugly reality crashed down. My own children saw me not as their mother, a person who loved them and deserved respect, but as a bank account with a pulse, an inheritance to be accessed prematurely. The next few hours were a blur of shock and quiet tears shed in the privacy of my bedroom. I didn't confront them when they eventually left, offering casual goodbyes and promises to visit soon. I simply nodded, managed a tight smile, and closed the door behind them. The house felt different, contaminated by their calculating presence. That night, sleep offered no escape. I replayed snippets of the conversation, each word a hammer blow. But as the shock began to subside, something else took its place, a cold, hard resolve. They thought I was easy? They thought I was forgetful? They thought they could simply take what wasn't theirs? They were wrong. Terribly, fundamentally wrong. I wouldn't collapse. I would prepare. I wouldn't lash out blindly. I would plan methodically. My first step was small, almost instinctive. I located my financial records, bank statements, investment summaries, property deeds, Robert's will, my own current will. I gathered them all, every important document I could find, and put them in a secure, fireproof box in my closet. I also changed the passwords to my online banking accounts and email. It felt like locking the barn door after the horses had bolted, but it was a start, a tangible action in the face of overwhelming betrayal. It was the first defensive action, a quiet declaration to myself that I would protect what Robert and I had built. The days that followed were a masterclass in maintaining a poker face. John and Sarah called, cheerful, asking if I was busy the coming weekend. Emily texted, inviting me to lunch. I accepted, pretending everything was normal, observing them with new, clear eyes. Their smiles seemed strained, their questions about my health just a little too probing. Are you feeling well, Mom? You seem a little tired. Sarah watched me closely when I misplaced my reading glasses, a tiny flicker of something calculating in her eyes. They were already laying the groundwork, subtly trying to establish a narrative of decline. The pressure escalated. John called with a new business idea, a revolutionary app that needed significant upfront investment. It's a sure thing, Mom. Think of the returns. It's way better than leaving your money just sitting there. He wanted a six-figure sum. When I demurred, saying I needed time to think, his tone shifted. Come on, Mom. You always said you wanted to help us get ahead. Don't you believe in me? Guilt by accusation. Sarah started commenting more frequently on the house. It was too big for me, she said. Hard to maintain. You know, we could help you sell it, Mom. Handle all the details. You could move into a nice little apartment. No fuss, the same words I had overheard, now spoken directly to me, presented as loving concern. Emily and Mark echoed these sentiments, albeit more gently. We just worry about you rattling around in this big place, Mom. This increasing pressure, combined with the memory of that overheard conversation, extinguished any lingering doubt. I was their target. Their carefully constructed performance of filial piety was a cover for calculated greed. It was time to gather evidence, not just rely on a shocking memory. I started a private journal, a small, plain notebook I kept hidden. In it, I meticulously documented every interaction, dates, times, who called or visited, what they asked for, the exact phrasing they used. I noted Sarah's comments about the house, John's persistent requests for investment money, the subtle questions about my health. I started saving every text message, every email. I learned how to screenshot conversations on my phone. I even set my phone to automatically record all calls, checking the legality in my state. It was legal as a single-party consent state, meaning I could record a conversation I was part of without telling them. This felt invasive, but necessary. I was building a case. I was no longer just their mother. I was a potential victim documenting a crime. My next crucial step was seeking professional help. I made an appointment with an elder law attorney recommended by a trusted friend. Her name was Miss Hansen, a sharp, no-nonsense woman with kind eyes. I sat in her office, the fireproof box of documents on my lap, and recounted everything: Robert's passing, my history of helping the children, the overheard conversation, the escalating pressure, the demands, the subtle attempts to portray me as declining. As I spoke, a sense of quiet strength began to replace my initial hurt. I wasn't just reacting, I was acting. Ms. Hansen listened patiently, taking notes. When I finished, she nodded slowly. This is classic financial elder abuse, Mrs. Davies. They're attempting to manipulate you into relinquishing control of your assets for their benefit. The good news is, you are lucid, capable, and have caught on early. The evidence you are gathering is crucial. She explained my rights. My assets were mine. My home was mine. My decisions about my health and finances were mine, as long as I was deemed competent. She advised me on how to strengthen my position. 1. Review and update legal documents. Ensure my will reflected my true wishes, which at this point was not to give my assets to those trying to steal them while I was alive. Update my power of attorney, naming a trusted friend or professional fiduciary, not my children. 2. Secure assets. Move money if necessary, close joint accounts. I thankfully didn't have any with them. Change beneficiaries on accounts if applicable, but most importantly, ensure no one else had access to my funds or investments. 3. Establish clear boundaries. This was the hardest part. It meant reducing contact, saying a firm no, and being prepared for the backlash. 4. Prepare for legal action. If they persisted or took concrete steps, like trying to file for guardianship, we would be ready to defend myself with the evidence I was gathering. Leaving Ms. Hansen's office, I felt a profound sense of relief mixed with determination. I had a plan. I had an ally. They saw me as easy, my lawyer saw me as a client worth protecting. The manipulators sensed the shift. My no to John's investment scheme was met with cold silence for a few days, followed by Sarah calling, her voice dripping with faux concern. John's really hurt, Mom. He feels like you don't support his dreams. It's just money, Mom. You can't take it with you. And he's your son, guilt, layered thick. I calmly reiterated that I wasn't comfortable with the investment, that my savings were for my own future security. The call ended awkwardly. Then came the fake emergency. Emily called, panicked. Mom, little Timmy fell at school, he needs surgery, and our insurance won't cover it all. We need $15,000 immediately. My heart seized. Timmy was my grandson. But something felt off. Emily sounded overly dramatic, and when I asked for details about the hospital, the doctor, and the specific procedure, she became vague and agitated. I told her I would need to verify the details with the hospital directly before I could do anything. She stammered, then John got on the phone, angry. "Mom, how can you question this? Your own grandson. Are you saying we're lying?" This was antagonist micro-cameo 2, the direct confrontation where the mask slipped. His fury was real, but it wasn't the fury of a desperate father. It was the fury of someone whose trap wasn't working. "I just need to understand the situation fully, John," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Medical emergencies are serious. I need information." He hung up on me. Later that day, I quietly called the school. Timmy had indeed fallen, scraped his knee, but he was fine and home. There was no surgery. There was no emergency. The call had been a test, a tactic to gauge my willingness to hand over money without question. They were using my love for my grandson as leverage. This was the moment my resolve hardened completely. They weren't just greedy. They were cruel. There would be no turning back now. I would protect myself and my future, even if it meant severing ties permanently. Working with Ms. Hansen, we began to put the strategic preparations into motion. First, we drafted a new will and durable power of attorney, naming my friend Susan as executrix and agent. We notarized them, signed them correctly, and Ms. Hansen kept the originals in her secure file. Next, I worked with my financial advisor, also recommended by Ms. Hansen, to consolidate accounts and add extra layers of security. We discussed the possibility of a trust later, but for now, securing direct access was paramount. The house was the biggest piece. They coveted it. I decided to sell it. It was bittersweet. So many memories were in those walls. But the thought of them pawing over my belongings, calculating the resale value of every piece of furniture, made staying unbearable. It was also a strategic move. Selling the house would convert the largest, most visible asset into a less accessible form, cash, which I could then move and manage more securely, out of their potential reach. It would also remove their primary target and force their hand. We quietly listed the house with an agent I trusted, someone from outside my immediate social circle. Ms. Hansen also advised me on establishing clear boundaries. I would no longer be available on demand. I would not discuss finances. I would not allow them into my home unaccompanied. This felt unnatural, like building walls where there had only been open doors. The real turning point, the smoking gun that sealed their fate in my mind and provided irrefutable evidence, came unexpectedly. John called one evening, sounding unusually flustered. He claimed his laptop was broken and he desperately needed to access some files stored on his old hard drive, which he thought might still be connected to the desktop computer he'd left at my house years ago. He asked if he could swing by to pick it up, or better yet, if I could just plug it in and email him the files he needed. He gave me the name of a file. I agreed, something about his urgency setting off my internal alarm bells. When he arrived, I was ready. I had the desktop computer in the living room, and I plugged in the external hard drive he'd left. He waited impatiently while I navigated the old files. He kept looking at the front door, clearly anxious to leave. I found the file he asked for, attached it to an email draft, and sent it. As he grabbed the hard drive, muttering thanks, he seemed relieved. After he left, a nagging feeling prompted me to look around the hard drive further. His request for that specific file had felt a little too convenient. I explored the folders, finding old college papers, photos, music. Then I found a folder labeled innocuously planning. Inside were spreadsheets detailing my assets, including estimations of the house's value. There were documents outlining legal strategies for obtaining power of attorney. And then I found it, a typed document titled Mom's Strategy, Phase 2. It wasn't a joke. It was a detailed, step-by-step plan to declare me incompetent, gain control of my finances, sell the house, and divide the proceeds. It included estimates for my hypothetical assisted living costs and calculations of how much would be left over for them. There were even notes about how to handle potential resistance from me, suggesting tactics like isolating me from friends, gaslighting me about my memory, and using the grandchildren to make me comply. This wasn't just greed. It was a full-blown, calculated conspiracy to strip me of my autonomy and my assets. It was cold, clinical, and utterly devastating. But within the devastation came a fierce sense of clarity. This document was the legal weapon Ms. Hansen had talked about. This proved intent, malice, and a clear plan for exploitation. I calmly copied the entire folder onto a USB drive and immediately called Ms. Hansen. Her reaction was grim satisfaction. "This, Mrs. Davies, is precisely what we needed. This isn't just talk. This is documented intent. We can use this." With the smoking gun in hand and my resolve solid as stone, we moved to implement the final phase of my counter-strategy. The house sold quickly, above the asking price. Ms. Hansen set up a special, secure account for the proceeds, inaccessible to anyone but me and my financial advisor under strict protocols. My other investments were also restructured and secured. My new will and POA were filed. I was financially firewalled. The time came for the final move. I chose a quiet Wednesday morning. Ms. Hansen's office served the legal documents. They weren't being sued for damages. Yet. This first wave was strategic. Official notification that their attempts to gain power of attorney had been rejected, that my assets were secured under professional management, and that any further harassment or attempts to access my finances would result in formal legal action for financial elder abuse and harassment. There was also a cease and desist order regarding contact about my finances or property. I didn't deliver the documents myself. A process server handled it. I imagine the scene, John answering the door, perhaps expecting a package, only to be handed legal papers. Sarah reading them over his shoulder, her face falling from anticipation to shock to fury. Emily and Mark receiving theirs separately, the news spreading quickly through panicked phone calls. My phone started ringing before the process server was likely even off their street. One missed call, then another, then dozens. From John, Sarah, Emily, Mark. Text messages flooded in, a torrent of shock, anger, confusion, and immediate attempts at damage control. "Mom, what is this? What are you doing? Call us back. This is insane. How could you do this? We're your family. Is this about the house? We can talk. You've made a terrible mistake, Mom." Sarah is crying. "How could you upset her like this? We just wanted to help you. Are you being manipulated? Who is telling you to do this? Mom, please, we need to talk. This is destroying the family. You're cutting us off. After everything?" The sheer volume was overwhelming. 40+ missed calls, growing by the minute. Their panic was palpable, a stark contrast to my quiet calm. They had expected me to be easy, to fold under pressure. They had expected to seize control. They hadn't expected resistance, documentation, or a lawyer. They hadn't expected me to use their own documented plans against them. I didn't answer the phone. I didn't reply to the texts. I sat in my living room, which felt lighter now that the house was sold and their greedy intentions were exposed. I was no longer the trusting, vulnerable widow. I was the woman who had protected herself, who had fought back with quiet strategy rather than loud emotion. Their desperation was their consequence. My peace was my victory. The legal victory was swift. With the evidence I provided, particularly the mom's strategy document, any attempt they made to challenge my competency or access my assets was easily defeated. They had no legal leg to stand on. Their own words and plans condemned them. They faced consequences, not jail time, but financial and social repercussions. Their reputation within the extended family suffered greatly when the truth, backed by documentation, came out. They had alienated the person who had always been their safety net, and that net was now permanently closed. I moved out of the old house and into a smaller, cozier place across town, a place they didn't know and wouldn't have the address for. My life became quieter, centered around my friends like Susan, new neighbors, and activities I enjoyed. The constant pressure was gone. The calls and texts eventually stopped, fading from a flood to an occasional, unanswered ripple. The family relationship, as I had known it, was over. It had been replaced by boundaries, protection, and distance. I had lost my children in a way, but I had found myself again. I had stood up for myself, protected my future, and reclaimed my peace. Thanks for watching till the end. If you enjoyed this story, give this video a like if you haven't already, and subscribe for more stories about standing up for yourself.